Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Kilayim, Chapter 9, Halacha 3. This is part 2 of this year, and in the art scroll we're on 80A1. Today we're getting into Rebbe's life, and Rebbe, by the way, was Rabbi Yudah HaNasi's. And Rebbe was the Nasi. He was the head of the Jewish people. He was also descended from King David. And it was a way where they could take the Nasi and basically make sure that the lineage of King David would still stay in circulation. In other words, they would know who was descended from King David. And that way, when they rebuild the temple, and they'll be able to say, and to educate the descendants of King David to make sure that we have a Mashiach ben David. Now, really, the shir today in part 2 is going to be about Jewish saintliness. That's going to be the idea about today. And we also have an amazing story about Rebbe's student, Rabbi Chia the Great. And I will tell you what the Bavli says about the amazing story, and it's something that every Jew should know about. So the Gemara says that Rebbe lived in Sapori for 17 years, and he applied to himself the verse where it says, and Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, saying that, and Yudah lived in Sapori 17 years. So he's making a comparison. Most of his life, he was not living in Sapori. He only lived in Sapori at the end of his life when he was in bad health. And, by the way, Yaakov lived in Egypt for 17 years, and at that point when he was in Egypt, he was also in bad health. He was old, he was infirmed, his eyesight was not very good, and sadly he was not living in Eretz Yisrael. Now, Rebbe began the last 17 years of his life in poor health, and he was before living in Bet Shiurim. That's, by the way, where he was buried. But why was he in Bet Shiurim? That's where his court was. And so, just like Yaakov was out of his place, so too Rabbi Yudah HaNasi's, Rebbe was out of his place. And so he would make a comparison between this and that. This, by the way, this verse is coming in Bereshit 47:28 with Yaakov. And the Sifsei Tzaddik is suggesting about a comment from Bereshit Rabbah 96.5 that Rebbe was the spiritual counterpart to Yaakov. We talked about this at the end of part 1 of the shir yesterday, that there's a comparison between Yaakov and Esav, and Antoninus was the Tov be'Esav, and Rabbi Yudah HaNasi's was of course, Tov be'Yaakov. Now, Yaakov had a lot of spiritual accomplishments. What is that? We see that, he was, the light of the written Torah. And Rebbe also did something amazing, right? He was the light of the oral Torah. He's the one who wrote down the Mishnah in a time when it might have become forgotten. And the Or Gadal Yahu is expanding on this idea and saying that the last 17 years of Yaakov's life constituted an exalted era in the history of the Jewish nation. And Yaakov used this time to infuse the Jewish people with a dynamism and an ability that they'd be able to survive the Egyptian exile that was about to begin after he died. And Rebbe did the same thing in the last 17 years of his life. We have a long and bitter exile from Edom, which is going to be Esav. And, again, we have the Tov be'Esav appearing in the story, but most of the story with Esav has not been the Tov of Esav. And Rebbe infused the Jewish people with a dynamism and a light by writing down from the academy the 6 orders of the Mishnah. And then if you have a person who is learning the Mishnah, each Mishnah has something like 6 or 8 halachot in it. And when you go through all 6 orders, you can come up with something like the 4,500 halachot that are through the oral laws, the basis structure for it. And then what you'll be able to do is you can take somebody who's very unlearned, and if they're going through a couple of pages a day, after 2-3 years, they can at least become aware of the halachot or the issues of the halachot in the Mishnah. Of course, we don't paskin from the Mishnah, but they can become aware of things like Nagayim. They can become aware of things like the issues we've been dealing with a vineyard or with planting foreign species within a certain area of each other. These things all are highlighted. So, when we have the rebuilding of the temple, we're going to need a time when everybody can get up to speed and start to get an acumen for the oral law. And, Mashiach, what's Mashiach going to come for? A nation of Amor Aretz, Amor Atzot. And, we need to educate our people. That's why if I run into people that are not very serious in learning, I recommend that they, take a couple of minutes a day and at least review the Mishnah, because after a few years, they can at least know the topics. Maybe they won't be able to analyze it in depth like somebody who studies the Gemara, but they'll know the issues. They won't be exactly an Amar'aretz. They'll have some strength. And that's the light that Rebbe has. And that, by the way, is going to be one of the tools. The Mishnah is going to be one of the tools for helping us to make sure we are not ignorant fools when the Bet HaMikdash returns. It'll be a tool that will be used to educate and to make sure that everybody can, recognize what is Tameh and Tahor and the Kalim and everything else. And people will be able to go from complete ignorance into something where we can start to, run the temple and show up in it. And this, this is a, something that was done pre-Messianic, but it really has deep Messianic symbolism and implications for, what is going to come. Now, there's a connection that, he's living in Sippori, out of his environment. Yaakov is as well. But Yaakov was productive. Yaakov was, teaching and learning Torah in where they were living and Egypt, and that gave him a lot of spiritual strength. And also the people were able to know their grandfather or great-grandfather, and it also gave direction of what kind of people they should be. And Yaakov is a flag for how we should try to live our life. And so is Rebbe. Rebbe was living in a lot of pain. He had some intestinal problems. He had teeth problems, which we'll be getting into. And, he was very much infirmed in the last 17 years. He went to Sippori because that's going to be where the center of learning is at the time. And, that's where he was. But he was away from, where he spent most of his life in his court. And that also pained him. And so he was saying that, just like, Yaakov left, so did he. And again, there's a deep connection between Esav and Yaakov, and also Rebbe and the Roman emperor. And they were very good friends. And, Esav was not completely bad. He was not pure evil. He was evil. But, there was still the idea of Tov be'esav. And, so even, when you have, idol worshippers, that are going to be the descendants of Esav today, which is the spiritual system of Esav, which is Christianity, is it 100% bad? It's bad. Avodah Zarah is bad, right? But, they do some good charitable works for orphans, for non-Jews. And they also do some, very important work in trying to, build awareness, particularly in the United States, about the horrors about abortion, which, by the way, for a non-Jew, the Rambam says, is a big avera. That's going to be in Malachim, I believe, chapter 10, and in Mishnah Torah, and it says over there that the non-Jews, it is murder for the non-Jews. and for doing the abortions, and they do some good works in trying to protest it and to make it harder to just do the rampant abortions like they want to do. But in the United States, since they've started the abortion laws in the 70s, there's been something like 80 million abortions, and that is a big blemish on the good of the United States. And it's 80 million people that have would have come to the world, and we're not talking about some sort of medical thing where there's some sort of disaster pending for the mother. We're not talking about that, but we are talking about a criticism where the widespread use of abortion as a form of birth control, which is horribly immoral and it's terrible. And over here we have the contrast between the good of Esav and the bad of Esav, and we've been living in the exile of Esav and the domination of the world by Esav with the domination of Christianity, which is a mamzer form of Judaism. They have a book and we have a book. They have their Messiah, we have our Messiah. They have their different messianic concept. We have our messianic concept, which is different. And there's a foolish idea in the world today that, particularly in the West, that there is something called Judeo-Christian values and ethics. And in the idea of Gemara, that's completely made up, false, non-true. And here's why: because when you look in the second Avodah Zarah, and you're looking at, even if somebody is coming with the same answer that you have, like do not steal, and a Jew will say do not steal, a Christian will say do not steal. But the problem is the way it is derived, right? We are deriving it with the concept of oneness, with the concept of a God that is pashut, that is simple, and that is outside time and space, and always outside of time and space. And they are coming with the concept of do not steal derived through a concept of another divinity, and that there's a man God involved, and so the way it's being derived, they're not using the same math to come up with the same answer. So just because you might have the same answer does not mean that the math is correct. And so we have to run away from this idea of Judeo-Christian, and we also have to run away from these interfaith conversations. They are not good for us. So the Gemara continues, and it tells us more about Rebbe's life, and it says, and from those 17 years where he's in Sippori, Rebbe underwent 13 years where he suffered terrible pain in his teeth. And Rabbi Yossi Barban said during all those 13 years of him suffering that no woman in childbirth died in Eretz Yisrael, and no woman miscarried her unborn child in Eretz Yisrael. The idea is that the merit of Rebbe suffering in those years prevented these misfortunes. Now, there's a concept that comes up here about do we have suffering of tzaddikim on behalf of the rest of the nation? And the Maharal says about this like this, that the Jewish people is not a collection of separate individuals, but it's an integral unit, like a human body. And although made up of many different organs and limbs, it comprises an integrated and a unified being. And the Maharal continues and says that there are times when Hashem causes certain parts of the body to suffer for the sins of the organism as a whole. And when that occurs, the punishment is directed against the essential part of the organism. And in effect, this is a strike against the body as a whole. And in the case of the Jewish people, this would mean that suffering is sometimes directed at the most righteous of the individuals. And, these people are the community's heart. Now, there's, obviously an idea that, maybe there's vicarious suffering that's coming through another. And the Ramban, by the way, writes an essay on Isaiah 53 called Kisvei Ramban, and it's in volume 1, page 321, where he's explaining this verse and these verses in Isaiah 53, about the suffering servant, and also talking about, by the way, the suffering servant is the Jewish people. And how do we know that? We know because who is called the servant? We know in Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us that we're the servant. So when you're looking at all the definitions, even from the Torah and also from the earlier parts of Isaiah, that the Jewish people as a whole are the suffering servants. And why are we suffering? We're suffering from the oppression from Esav and Yishmael, so which is going to be Christianity and Islam. So, what do we see here? We see an essay by the Ramban that is going to address a different way to think about it, where there's not vicarious suffering, but it is possible, says Rashi in his commentary on Vayikra 10:3, and also in Zevachim 115b, that it's possible for a righteous person to suffer on behalf of the generation and atone for their sins, either by choice or otherwise. And the idea is that, he is cleaning up the sins. And why is that? That's so that a greater number of people can partake in the world to come. And, Hashem did not create Jews just to destroy them. And so, this is an atonement process. And I know it sounds a lot like what the Christians are saying about their guy. But again, this is a concept that has existed in Judaism long before they ever thought up their religion. And the Gemara is going to look at the event that looks at the suffering. And this is a Musar thing. There's a lot of Musar in the Gemara, and this is something for us to learn in our everyday life. And the Gemara says like this: why did Rebbe suffer from his teeth? And the Gemara says, once Rebbe was passing by, and he saw a calf was ready to be slaughtered, and it went and it hung its head in the folds of Rebbe's garment. And the calf bleated and said unto him, Rebbe, save me. And Rebbe said to it, go, it is for this that you were created. And they said in heaven, since he does not show mercy, let suffering come upon him. Now, it's true, right? This calf, can be used to make a pair of tefillin, and it can be used to feed people chalent on Shabbat, and it can be used to make the cloth for the skin to write on for the Torah scroll. That's all true. And yes, it was created for that. And yes, the animal's end was slaughter. But the calf went to Rebbe and wanted to be saved. And in these circumstances, we have to have merit. We have to assist. We don't push away. And when somebody is coming and seeking protection, we have to respond to that. And, the Yafei Marah is basically pointing out that Rebbe suffered in his teeth in particular because this involved no general illness. And the issue with his teeth was simply pain. And, it wasn't causing him, damage to his heart or something like that. The idea about targeting the pain, the teeth, was to give him pain because of his lack of mercy. And this is an idea that we have to have more compassion in our life. We have to have more compassion to animals. We have to pay attention to how animals are slaughtered. And we have to have more sensitivity to all of God's creations. And the Gemara talks about, the event that brought the heavenly decree and Rebbe's suffering to an end. And the Gemara says, in the end, how did Rebbe find relief? And the Gemara says he saw that his household servants were about to exterminate a nest of mice. And he said to them, let it be. And the Gemara says that it is written, where it says, and his mercy is upon all his creations. This, by the way, is in Tehillim 145:9. And they said in heaven, since he shows mercy now, let us show him mercy. So this is following this principle that, however you're going to conduct yourself, you're going to get divine judgment dealing with you in a similar way. So if you're showing people mercy and compassion and warmth, Hashem and the way the universe is organized is going to show more warmth and kindness and compassion to you. And so something that we can learn as a deep lesson and keep in our back pocket to remember. The Gemara continues with a story from Rebbe's life, and it took place at the end of the 13 years of his suffering from his teeth. And the conclusion of the story describes how Rebbe was healed. So the Gemara says like this, that Rebbe was a very humble person, and he used to say, whatever someone tells me, I am prepared to do, except for that which the elders of the Basira family did for my ancestor Hillel, because they released themselves from the office of Nasi permanently and appointed him instead, since they recognized that he was superior to them in Torah scholarship. Now, there's a list in the Gemara of only 4 cases where people voluntarily gave up power. And the sons of Basira were one of them. The other, by the way, the Yerushalmi says, was Rabbi Manna and Rabbi Hiskiah. Rabbi Hiskiah built the academy in Sipori, and Rabbi Hiskiah retired and gave it over to Rabbi Manna. Rabbi Manna is one of the last commentators in the Yerushalmi. And there's only a few cases where people give up power voluntarily. The sons of Basira, there was a time when the Romans were here and they made, learning Torah basically impossible. And the scholars needed to go into hiding because they were being hunted and killed. And the sons of Basira, the Yerushalmi calls them the sons of Basira, but the elders of Basira, and in the Bavli they call them the sons of Basira. It's the same. And basically, these were people who were very learned, but not learned enough to be hunted by this decree from the Romans. And they were caretakers. They were custodians. They were stewards. They were in the position of Nasi, and they weren't Torah scholars, but they knew everything. They knew the Mishnah. They knew what was the right way, the straight way. And this was in the time when Shammai the elder was in hiding, and Hillel the elder came from Bavel, and the Romans didn't know of him, so they didn't know to persecute him. And there was a back and forth that comes up in Psachim in the Yerushalmi in chapter 6, Halacha 1, and that's how they identified Hillel the elder to be a leader. And when they realized that his learning, he learned that Hillel the elder learned from Shammai and Naphtalian, who were the predecessors to the elders of Basira, that they stepped aside. And by the way, if you look in the list of Pirkei Avot, and you look at the list going from Moshe Rabbeinu up until they finished the Bavli, the sons of Basira are not in there. And why is that? Because they didn't have the scholarship of somebody like Hillel, but they knew a lot. And they were tzaddikim. They stepped aside. And this is something that, we should learn from them. And, it's something that, they in the case over there, the 14th of Nisan came, and, Pesach was supposed to fall on Shabbos. And there was a question about whether they could offer the sacrifice of the Pesach on the 14th, or they could do it on the 15th, and they weren't sure. And so, they answered, Hillel the elder was the one who was able to answer what the halacha is, and they tested him, and ultimately they accepted him because he said, well, I heard this from Shammai and Naphtalian. So the Gemara continues, and it says, if Rav Huna, who was the Rish Galusa, were to come up here to Eretz Yisrael. Rav Huna, by the way, was in charge of the diaspora. And it would say, I would seat him above me, because he is from the tribe of Judah, and I'm from the tribe of Benjamin. So the idea is that, they're both related to the house of David, but his pedigree is better than his. So why is that? The Gemara says, if he descends from the male side, I descend from the female side. So the Gemara says, once Rabbi Chia the Great came to Rebbe, and by the way, so in that story, he's basically saying that, as the Nasi, the head of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, that he would step aside for the Rish Galusa, who is Rav Huna at the time, and is the head of the Jewish people in Chutz La'aretz, and they're both descended from King David. So the Gemara says, once Rabbi Chia the Great came to Rebbe, and Rabbi Chia said to him, "Behold, Rav Huna is outside." Rebbe's face turned red with consternation. And Rebbe was worried about the indignity of sitting as Nasi to the Rish Galusa, because Rabbi Chia was the Rish Galusa. Rav Huna was the Rish Galusa. And Rebbe's face turned red. And upon seeing this, Rabbi Chia told him, "I meant that his coffin has come." And in other words, the Rish Galusa has passed away. And at this point, Rebbe came to him and said, "Go and see who it is that needs you outside." So Rabbi Chia went and found no person. And then Rabbi Chia realized that Rebbe was upset with him. In other words, Rebbe slighted Rabbi Chia's student, says the Marafulda, for not being considerate of Rebbe's sensitive situation. Rabbi Chia should have realized that a visit from a live Rish Galusa would cause Rebbe displeasure. The Rabbi Chia should have been clear in saying that the coffin of the Rish Galusa arrived. And the Gemara says that he undertook a regimen of self-rebuke upon himself and resolving not to come before Rebbe for 30 days. And the idea says, the Bavli in Moed Katan 16a, in a parallel in the Ritva, is saying that this regimen is known as Nasifa, and it's undertaken by somebody who incurs the displeasure of his teacher, a great person, and is customary 1 day in duration or 1 week, but in the case of a Nasi, it was 30 days. And Rabbi Yosef Barban says that during all those 30 days, Rav learned from his uncle Rabbi Chia the essential content of the Torah. And at the end of 13 years and 30 days, Elijah the prophet, came before Rebbe in the form of Rabbi Chia the Great. And Elijah said to Rebbe, "How is my master doing?" And Rebbe replied to him, "One tooth is tormenting." And Elijah said to him, "Show it to me." And Rebbe showed it to him. And Elijah, in the form of Rabbi Chia the Great, placed his finger on it and was cured. And the next day, Rabbi Chia the Great came before Rebbe. And Rabbi Chia said to him, "How's my master doing?" And he said, "That tooth of yours, how's it doing?" And Rebbe said to him, "From the moment that you placed your finger on it, it was cured." And at that moment, when Rabbi Chia realized that Rebbe's suffering ended, he said, "Woe to you, the women in labor of Eretz Yisrael, and woe to the pregnant women of Eretz Yisrael." And Rabbi Chia then said to Rebbe, "I was not here yesterday." And Rebbe realized that it was not Rabbi Chia himself who healed him, but it was Elijah the prophet, and he came in the form of Rabbi Chia the Great. And from that moment on, Rebbe treated Rabbi Chia with a newfound respect. And there's an example that when Rebbe would come to the study hall, he would say that Rabbi Chia the Great enter ahead, and Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, said to Rebbe, "Should he enter also ahead of me?" And Rebbe replied to him, "Heaven forbid. Rather, Rabbi Chia should enter ahead, and Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, should enter ahead of ahead." In other words, that Rebbe showed great affection and respect for Rabbi Yishmael, and they wanted to sit both of them at the head of the students. And this is all basically saying that Rabbi Chia is a great man and a holy man. And the Gemara continues, and it says, Rebbe would relate the praises of Rabbi Chia the Great in the presence of Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosef. And one time, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, saw Rabbi Chia in the bathhouse. And Rabbi Chia displayed no deference for him whatsoever. And Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, later said to Rebbe, "Is this the one whose praises you relate?" Rebbe said to him, "What did he do to you?" And Rabbi Yishmael, son of Rabbi Yossi, said to him, "He saw me in the bathhouse and showed me no deference." And Rebbe said to Rabbi Chia, "Why did you do this?" And Rabbi Chia said to him, "May misfortune come upon me if I'm lying when I say that even if I washed in the bathhouse that day, I was not aware of it. I certainly do not know if you washed there And all I know is that at the time when I was sitting there, I was focusing my mind's eye on the entire Agadah of the Book of Tehillim, and I must not have been aware of my surroundings. In other words, he was in deep thinking about the deep points about Agadah. And so he just didn't notice. He just didn't notice. And the Gemara says from that time on, Rebbe gave Rabbi Chia 2 students to walk with him and protect him, and on account of the danger that he might present himself. In other words, since he was so engrossed in learning and becoming unaware of his environment, maybe he would fall into a hole or something, and he would endanger himself. And the Gemara is going to talk about, this great Amarah who passed away. So after Rabbi Chia passed away, Rabbi Yosei fasted 80 days in order to see Rabbi Chia the Great in a dream. And in the end, he did see him, but after the experience, his hands were shaking and his eyes were dimmed. And lest you say that Rabbi Yosei was an inconsequential person, the following incident shows to the contrary, that he was actually a great man. And the Gemara says that a weaver came before Rabbi Yochanan and said to him, "In my dream, I saw the sky was falling, and one of your students was supporting it." And Rabbi Yochanan said to the weaver, "And do you know who? Can you tell me which student it is?" And the weaver told Rabbi Yochanan, "If I would see him, I would recognize him." So Rabbi Yochanan passed all of the students before the weaver, and the weaver recognized Rabbi Yosei and says, and points him out. And so basically Rabbi Yosei was a very great man, and even he trembled before the vision of Rabbi Chia the Great. And there's another story about this. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish fasted 300 fasts in order to see Rabbi Chia the Great in a dream, and he did not see him. And in the end, when he realized he had been unsuccessful, he began to become distressed. And Rish Lakish said to himself, what was it about Rabbi Chia that puts him so far ahead of me? Did he toil in the study of Torah more than me? And the emissaries of heaven told Rish Lakish, he said, he disseminated Torah among the Jewish people more than you. And not only that, but he also went into exile for the sake of the Torah. And it became like a shliach. And Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish replied to them, said, "But did I not go into the exile for the sake of Torah? I certainly did." And they said to him, "You went into exile to learn Torah, and he went into exile to teach Torah." And the story is going to go like this. Certainly they all put all their efforts into learning Torah, and that's something that we should aspire to as well. We should try to put all of our efforts into learning Torah. But Rabbi Chia would be what's considered a teacher of children. And he would go to a city where there was no teacher for young children, and he would take 5 children, and he would teach each of them a different book of the Torah. And he would use materials that he had prepared personally with a lot of effort and thought, and he would teach, he'd tell each of them to teach others what he knew. So in other words, you would have one child who knew everything about the book in the Chumash about Bereshit, and one about Vayikra, and one of these would now become a teacher of children and would teach Vayikra to children. And he would also then take 6 children and teach each one of them a different order of the Mishnah, and he would then tell each to go and teach others what they knew. So what would happen is he would, teach one of these 6 children, Seder Zerayim, like what we're learning now, and this one would become a teacher of students, of children, and he would go and teach. And this is a way where, by the way, the story is in Bava Metzia 85b, the Bavli. And this is an idea to make sure that the Torah would never become forgotten from the Jewish people. And that is something that is very special, to go into exile to teach Torah. The Gemara talks now about Rabbi Chia's burial grounds, and it says many years later, when Rav Huna, who was, by the way, the Amarah from Bavel, and also the family of the Rish Galusa passed away, they brought him to Eretz Yisrael as well. And the people in charge of Rav Huna's remains said, "Where shall we bury him?" And some people said, "Let us put him with Rabbi Chia the Great and his sons," because Rabbi Huna was from their family. And
the idea is that they're trying to find a place to put them, to bury them. So the Gemara says, upon hearing this, they said, "But who wants to put the body of Rav Huna there? Who would dare intrude upon the sanctity of Rabbi Hiya's crypt?" And Rabbi Haggai stepped forward and said, "I will go and put the body there." And Rabbi Haggai had a lot of merit, and at the age of 18, he was already an expert in the Talmud, and he also never had a nocturnal emission because he served Rabbi Hiya in his lifetime, and he was acquainted with his deeds. He was a student of Rabbi Hiya. This, by the way, a story about this can be found in the Bavli Moed Katan 25a if you're interested. And they said to Rabbi Haggai, they said, "You are simply seeking a pretext for yourself because you're an old man and expect to die there on account of the intrusion. And you really want to go put yourself there to remain interned next to Rabbi Hiya." In other words, they're accusing Rabbi Haggai to say that, look, you're very old at this time in your life, and, you want to go be buried by your teacher. And, you're preparing, we know that it's really a ruse for you to be, you're, old, and maybe you know that you're close to death, and this is a trick for you to die in there. So the Gemara says, and, say that Rabbi Haggai replied and says, "If that's what you suspect me of, then let a cord be placed on my feet. And if I delay for any unreasonable length of time, then you withdraw me from pulling me out." In other words, the same thing that was done for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, this should be done to him, where there's a cord, you just pull me out. So, that way that you can't accuse me of this. So they accepted Rabbi Haggai's suggestion, and Rabbi Haggai went and found 3 who were engaged in judgment. And the verdict follows like this. It says, "Yudah, my son, there is no one after you, and Hiskiah, my son, there is no one after you." So these were the sons of Rabbi Hiya. Rabbi Yudah and Hiskiah were the sons of Rabbi Hiya, and they were buried with him. And there was a heavenly voice going out proclaiming that, "Yudah, my son, there's no one after you, and Hiskiah, my son, there's no one after you." And the Marafulda explains that the voice meant to compare the 2 sons with their great father, Rabbi Hiya the Great, and to say that, they didn't leave behind anybody who could equal Rabbi Hiya the Great in these noble deeds or saintliness. And, the Gemara continues and says, "After you, Joseph, the son of Israel, the patriarch, there's no one else." This is also a reference to Rabbi Hiya, who in his generation personified the qualities of Joseph, the son of Jacob. Why would that be? And it's because the sages are teaching that Joseph was the prime disciple of their father Jacob, and that Joseph took after Jacob in the significant aspects of his life. And the Yerushalmi is basically teaching that Rebbe's role in that generation paralleled the role of Jacob in his generation. And so Rabbi Hiya was to Rebbe what Joseph had been to Jacob. And, Jacob, Rabbi Hiya the Great continued the work of his, father in Torah, his teacher, his Rebbe, Rabbi Yudah Nasi, the Rebbe. And the Gemara continues and says, Rabbi Haggai began to lift his eyes upward and look at what was happening, but before he could see anything of consequence, someone said to him, lower your eyes, lest you be harmed." Rabbi Haggai heard the voice of Rabbi Hiya the Great speaking to Rav Yudah, his son. And the Gemara says, "Make room for Rav Huna so that he may sit and be buried next to you." But the Gemara says, but Rav Huna, in his humility, did not accept the honor upon himself to be seated next to Rav Yudah. And in response, Rabbi Hiya uttered the following blessing, saying, "Just as Rav Huna did not accept upon himself the honor of being seated next to Rabbi Hiya's family, which is an act of consideration that will last to the end of the world, so too may his descendants never cease." And Rabbi Haggai emerged from the crypt safely, and the Gemara says now he was 80 years old and his years were doubled for him. So because, says the Pnei Moshe, he occupied himself with Rabbi Huda's burial, or maybe people might have suspected that something was going on with him. Hashem wanted to demonstrate that he was above suspicion. There wasn't some secret motive in trying to bury Rav Huna, and there wasn't some weird game that he was trying to do. And Rav Huna did find a resting place in another corner of that cave, and according to the Bavli's account in Moed Katan, page 25, which does have some differences, Rabbi Haggai stood the coffin up and left it there, over there. Now, there's an idea that, somebody who's, glancing at, the heavenly academy, can be blinded. And, there's an idea that, maybe, in learning Torah, that you go at a steady rate. You don't try to burn yourself out. You don't try to go too fast. Because it's like looking in the sun. And in everything agadic or in depth, we have a mind that is always limited. And in your learning, you should never try to push yourself past that. In other words, you shouldn't look at things that are too deep for you. You should look at things that are challenging. You should always stay challenged, stay relevant in it. But you shouldn't go into things and get yourself into ungrounded situations. We will continue part 3 of this year tomorrow. Have a great day.